My name is Stephan Chandler Garcia. I work in our audience relations team at Salesforce. And we're going to be talking about a lot of features that may or may not be available yet. So please make all of your purchasing decisions based off of our currently available products and not any of the future features or functionality that we're going to be talking about today. So what do you do in audience relations at Salesforce? In short, I work across our admin and developer evangelist teams to build cool stuff, to build demos, to really be customer zero with a lot of our software and technology. So we're usually the first ones to get to play with all of the new stuff, to break it, and to really actually help feed the documentation that we're using to build and deliver a lot of our capabilities. Now, it's not just me though. You will see a lot of familiar faces on this slide. We have a huge team, well, what used to be a much bigger team of admin and developer evangelists, developer marketing, admin marketing folks who really help us build content. There are lots of us here today. So I know Danielle and Akshata had a session earlier, Alba has a session today, and we really get to travel the world teaching you all about the new topics, old topics, best practice, and really give you insight into how we're thinking at Salesforce for admins and developers. Speaking of, so at the last London's Calling, can I get a show of hands? Who was at my talk last year at London's Calling? I've got two here. Okay, I actually thought I might get fired because I was giving a demo of a product that we were about to launch the next day, and it was streaming. And thankfully, no one tweeted or sent screenshots. But at the last London's Calling, just over a year ago, we were still calling all of the Einstein capability Einstein GPT, even though it was incredibly cringy. Okay, 20% of the audience had even tried ChatGPT. We hadn't announced the trust layer, and like I said, it was the first demo of Prompt Builder ever, like 13 months ago. It's almost insane how far the technology has come since then. I also have a bone to pick with the comedian who did the keynote last year because he spent like 5 minutes making fun of me and AI because I was the talk that was on before he was going on stage to make some jokes. Okay, and I'd like to say to him, who's writing the jokes now? It's probably going to be ChatGPT at this instance because even he was skeptical of how far the technology would come in that short period of time. And so what I want to talk to you about today is all of the advancement that's happened over those last 12 months and really where everything's going. And it starts with this marketing slide that everyone hates until I kind of dissect what it actually means to them as admins and developers. Okay, you will hear frequently from Mark Benioff in all of our keynotes that we're in an AI revolution. Okay, that started out with predictive AI and is slowly making its way all the way through artificial general intelligence. Now, so what does this mean to you? So who here's used Einstein case classification or any of the service cloud features that use predictive AI? We've got a few hands. Or next best action, all of these capabilities that we've been rolling out over the last 10 years at Salesforce. Okay, a lot of those are based off of predictive AI technology and taking traditional machine learning algorithms and neural networks to create outcomes. Okay, so for example, if you're talking about case classification, you're talking about a very specific data type, okay, which would be cases in Salesforce. You've got a subject line, you've got comments, maybe a description, okay, and you're producing a case type. Okay, you know what the input is going to be. It's going to be cases. You know what the expected output is going to be. It's going to be a string that is relevant to a case type that you've programmed it to predict. Okay, that really changed with the sort of introduction of generative AI and these models that are a billion times the size of these predictive models that are being built for a specific purpose. Okay, these generative models don't require a specific input type. You can input any text-based prompt, a string, images, audio, and generate multi-different types of outputs, whether that be images, whether that be audio, whether that be just text-based generations, okay? And those two technologies combined have really accelerated the way that we start to think about autonomous AI and agent-based capabilities and frameworks. The perfect example of this, and I told this yesterday, and I can see a lot of people nodding and going through the same experience, is I needed to make a return on Amazon, and it was a product I'd purchased that wasn't allowed to be returned for some reason. Not a mistake I usually make, but I made it this time. So I logged on to Amazon, opened up the chatbot to say, hey, can I talk to an agent to return this product? But at this point, I didn't even need to talk to an agent. Okay, it was able to identify my product. It was able to check the return policy, see that I wasn't able to return it. However, it initiated a return for me, sent me a shipping label, and processed everything that I needed to do, okay? 12 months ago, I would have been asking to speak to an agent because it would have just said, system says no, you're not allowed to return this, we're not going to let you. Okay? And they've been able to use capabilities like generative AI to really accelerate the adoption, and Amazon themselves bringing these agents into their business. And that's where you're seeing a lot of the technology world going, especially here at Salesforce. You're seeing us introduce capabilities like AI-based agents to accelerate the way that your customers are interacting with your company, to accelerate the way that your users are interacting with your company. And then that takes us to artificial general intelligence, which is what a lot of these companies are working towards. Okay? We wouldn't have the generative AI capability that we have right now today if organizations like OpenAI weren't working towards being the first to discover AGI. Okay? And so while that may be incredibly far off, the reason we're accelerating at such a rapid pace is because these companies are working towards that common goal of wanting to be the first to conquer that new technology. So what does this mean to the Salesforce ecosystem, to the Salesforce world? We rebranded the platform once again last year as the Einstein 1 platform, okay, but with purpose this time, okay? Because of the introduction of Hyperforce, which takes all of the core Salesforce infrastructure and is slowly rolling it over into public cloud, okay, we've been able to scale out all of the apps that we're building in many different ways and accelerate our pace of development as a company so that we can introduce new platforms into that metadata framework that we're all used to working with. So if you think about all of the different ways that you're interacting with metadata in Salesforce, we want to replicate those capabilities to existing platforms and to acquisitions that we've made in the past. We want to build all of our new platforms and frameworks using those same metadata capabilities so that everything you're building can come into that same world. So for example, if we're building out, I don't know, a generative AI platform, we want to make sure that you have the same way of manipulating and using that capability with that metadata framework that you use on core Salesforce platform. It's the same thing, like if we wanted to build a hyperscale data platform, we'd build it and roll it into the metadata framework that we already have with core. And we're going to start to see a lot of that capability extending out to our acquired products from the past, like Marketing Cloud. I'm sure a lot of us have seen that start to roll over into some core capability. Okay, Commerce Cloud now offers near core services that use the metadata to run apps like order management versus building them on their original stack that they were developed on. So in short, this means that we're able to really build and scale out new functionality and capability at a much faster pace than we've ever been to in the past. And the biggest testament to that is Data Cloud. Okay, I'm sure a lot of us have seen Data Cloud sessions today. Apparently someone made a joke about your AE calling about Data Cloud this morning and it got a big laugh. I've never seen Salesforce mobilize around a technology like they have with Data Cloud from an engineering perspective, from a sales and marketing perspective, and really from an innovation perspective as a company. Okay, because we see a massive need for tools like this inside of Salesforce ourselves. We're obviously the biggest Data Cloud customer. Okay, it's unlocking lots of new capability within Salesforce to build applications, and you'll start to actually see a lot of the really high volume data stuff that we're building internally is using Data Cloud as a backend. The perfect example of that is all of the feedback framework and audit logging around the generative AI capabilities we're building are all using Data Cloud as a store for processing and managing all of that information. Now, there are three core areas of this that you really need to understand and capabilities that power Data Cloud. And I'm going to get into some demos and show you what these look like in action. But really, number one, you're connecting data from source systems, okay, and you're unifying it inside of CRM with the context of using that data in CRM, okay? Right now, that's where we're focusing. That's where we want to talk about, okay? We're trying to help customers identify core data sets and data points within their company that they would find incredibly useful inside of CRM, whether that be sales or service or marketing, and then allow them to activate it. Now, these are probably, and in most cases, data sets that you wouldn't need or want to run a point-to-point integration for. Okay, it may be too much overhead to maintain. Okay, you may not want to do a full sync between these systems, but you want to use and manipulate that data inside of Salesforce, okay? And then we want to activate it. So we're talking about bringing in data from third-party systems or additional Salesforce orgs, unifying it against a single person. In this instance, I want to talk about unifying against a person, and then activating that data by bringing it into CRM, into marketing, into sales and service, so that you have even more information. And hopefully I'll be able to illustrate that with some examples in a minute. But it's very important to understand that this is not Salesforce, okay? It is part of our products, but it's not CRM. It's not part of the core platform in a way that it does not use the same data model, okay? The data model, the hierarchy, and the structure is much more in line with a full DB architecture that you're going to be building your applications on in your company, okay? All of your profiles are unified differently, contacts are not contacts, etc., to the point that you don't have those direct connections per se to the data mapping when you're bringing things together, which we'll get into in a minute. But what you need to understand is a contact in Data Cloud, or sorry, in CRM is not a contact in Data Cloud, okay? A lead in CRM is not necessarily a lead in Data Cloud, okay? The objects are mapped out vastly differently, which I will show you, but just know that the Data Cloud data model is not representative of what you're used to working in CRM. If you think you're going to be building objects and relationships in CRM and it be exactly that in Data Cloud, it's not. It's a very different way about thinking about data. You have to think about it as a database architect in a much broader way than you would if you were building out an app on Salesforce, okay? So I just want to make it clear, it's a different skill set. Like, we shouldn't be expecting a Salesforce admin, a Salesforce developer to jump in and be the Data Cloud rock star unless they have that sort of database architecture-oriented mentality. Now, it may be easy to connect the data, and we're trying to create tools to make it easier to do that, but it is a different skill set, and there's a lot of learning to be done by even myself as someone who's been a Salesforce developer for many years. Okay, this is a new journey for me. I don't come from a database architecture background, and so I think we're all kind of learning this together from a Salesforce perspective, and then really sort of tapping into other resources and other communities and ecosystems for development resource. There was someone I was talking to earlier who was talking about the fact that their team at their company, working for a big consulting firm, while doing core Salesforce work themselves, it's only a small part of the bigger business. And there are many other teams around the company that are working in Oracle, working in SAP, and working in integration who have skills that would be very useful to a Data Cloud implementation. Now, while I've just made everything sound incredibly complicated, I'm going to try and simplify that a little bit with a common use case and a way that I've been trying to explain Data Cloud to myself as well as to our customers. And it's using this fictitious company that we created called Coral Cloud Resorts. Okay, it's based off of some work that I did for TDX around travel and hospitality and a customer that we had called Turtle Bay. And it really internalizes the fact that if you're staying at a hotel, if you work in hospitality, okay, a hotel is never going to manage its reservations in Salesforce. Okay, it's never going to manage its customers in Salesforce. Marriott, IHG, Hilton, whatever, okay, probably have a property management system in one tab on their computer and Salesforce and Service Cloud in another tab on their computer, okay? They don't talk, they're not managed, okay? They're probably tabbing between the applications, okay? And we see this constantly to the point that all of these companies and all of these hotel chains could greatly benefit from having that reservation data that's core to their business inside of their Service Cloud instance, inside of their Sales Cloud instance, okay? But it's also incredibly data intensive. You probably don't want to sync all of your hotel reservations and bookings over to Salesforce because it's going to be an integration nightmare, it's going to take a lot of maintenance, and it's going to use up a lot of data storage. So it's a perfect use case where we have all of the reservation and guest data, in this case just in an S3 bucket, okay? And we'd want to surface that data and action it in CRM inside of Salesforce, okay? And so this is an example that we've created to really get people hands-on and teach them about how to bring Data Cloud into Salesforce, okay, for the purposes of activating against CRM. Now, has anyone gone through any of our AI Now days or tours or seen any of that content? So some of you have had the chance to see this in action and get hands-on with it. Okay, we built this out actually as a workshop to really try and get people into Data Cloud and getting hands-on with it, because it's not the easiest type of environment to get access to. And so we're able to distribute those for a couple of days for people to try out. In some instances, however, this is all going to be open sourced on GitHub very soon, fingers crossed, so that anyone can get onto GitHub, deploy the repo, get a Trailhead org, and actually get hands-on with Coral Clouds. So, like I said, there are 3 things we want to do and focus about when we're talking about Data Cloud. Okay, number 1, how do we ingest the data? Where is it coming from? How are we bringing it into Data Cloud? Okay, how are we then going to unify it? And then how are we going to act on it? So those are the 3 steps that we really want to make sure that we're thinking about when we're thinking about Data Cloud and Salesforce. Okay, and I'm going to start out by just sort of walking you around Data Cloud, getting you acclimated to what you're looking at and why. And then we'll get into some of the more broader use cases around AI and how the stories actually come together. So Data Cloud setup is separate from Salesforce setup. Okay? If you've had a chance to check out Data Cloud, there's a separate window for configuring a lot of your Data Cloud features. Okay? And through there is where you're going to make all of your connections to systems. So obviously, a massive use case for Data Cloud is connecting into your core CRM apps like Marketing Cloud, connecting multi-org. We see a lot of multi-org connections with Data Cloud, bringing in data from websites and mobile apps. You can create custom ingestion APIs to just kind of spit data into Data Cloud. But we also have lots of connectors that we've created so that you don't have to manually create those ingestion API connections for a lot of our partner systems. And so if we check out this connectors tab, what you're going to see is inbuilt we have a number of connections that we can make. I have 2 AWS connections here right now directly into S3. But here you can see out of the box, currently GA, we have connections directly into Databricks, into Amazon, Google Ads, Google Cloud Storage. The SFTP connector is super reliable. I end up building demos with that a lot because it's the fastest route to entry, and so many companies still rely on FTP servers for dropping data. It's just easy ways to think about how we're making those connections so that we can get direct access to the data sets inside of Data Cloud. So number 1, to get started with Data Cloud, you've got to find your connectors and make those connections. But when you get into Data Cloud, that's where it starts to really come together in bringing those data sets in. When you create a data stream, what you're doing is pointing to a data set. Okay? In this case, we could point to S3, we could point to CRM. And right now, we're working with CSVs. I want to just be able to bring a CSV in as a data set within Data Cloud. And you can go through and do the mapping process through a data stream here by number 1, selecting your connection, and then pointing directly at the CSV you're trying to get access to so that you can bring that data into Data Cloud. And there were a couple of sessions earlier about it as well. There is a Trailhead module on this so that you can see how to make those connections directly. But what we want to do is take that data stream, okay, and we're going to create a data lake object, okay? And a data lake object is where the data is held if it is a copy connection. So you can copy data into Data Cloud into your data lake object, or you can use our zero copy framework with partners like Snowflake to actually virtualize the data there. So there are kind of 2 ways that they get into the DLOs. But in this case, we're taking those guests and reservations, and then we're storing them as a data lake object, okay, that then gets mapped to what's called a data model object, okay, which is a separate view on top of your data lake object, okay? The data is being stored in the data lake object, but you're then taking it and transforming it through that data model. Okay, so for example, in this instance, we have 2 data lake objects. We have our reservations and we have our guest here, okay? The reservation data is going straight and being mapped right to a data model object. There's no mixing, there's no matching with other objects that exist within Data Cloud. But the guest isn't a direct representation of a person that we want to map to in Data Cloud, okay? So we've got some guest details here from the source system, like their birth date, their first name, their email address. We have an external ID, okay? That we're going to take and map to the canonical data model for people in Data Cloud, which looks slightly different. And we can do that mapping here in that data model mapping tool, okay? You're going to be mapping every single one of your data lake objects into a model object that you can then use and access. Okay, it is complicated. and confusing the first few times that you're trying to do this. But once you get your head around how the data is transformed on the fly, the DLO is just for holding the data. The data model object is where the data ends up and where you use it in theory. And so in this example, it's really simple. We're taking that simple data from the guest, just their first name, phone number, last name, email, and we're mapping it into two different data model entities on the other side. So we're taking that guest and we're mapping it to our individual, okay, which is that core representation of a person in Data Cloud. And in this case, we're mapping their email to their contact point email, which is a representation of their contact email. In theory, in Data Cloud, a single identity, a single person can have multiple contact points. They can have multiple phone numbers, multiple emails. It's a model that we've seen time and time again, and is becoming more standard as time goes on. And so what you'll see here is we're taking the guest data lake object, so the data that's coming in as a guest, and we're mapping it out to the contact point email and to the individual, which means that there is no guest data model object. Okay? At no point in time are you going to be querying for a guest. Okay? The guest is being serialized down to an individual. Okay? However, we're also doing the same thing for contacts in CRM. Okay? And so if we go into a tool called the Data Explorer within Data Cloud, what you're going to see here is in our data model object, okay, we're going to have our individual. Because remember, we're mapping to individuals. So our guests are going to become individuals. Okay? Our contacts in CRM are going to become individuals. If we have a separate marketing system that has more people in it, they're going to become individuals. And so if we filter this down here, I can add a filter for a specific contact. And so we'll go last name equals Rodriguez. Okay, and apply this filter. What will happen is we have two duplicates of the same person here. Okay, we have two Sophia Rodriguez's. I don't have their email on the table. Their email is the same because I put the data here, but their ID is different because you have one person coming over from CRM and you have one person coming over from our guest table in S3. Okay, this data is brought together and unified using a capability called identity resolution. Okay, and identity resolution is a place where you write rules for data matching to create a unified representation of a person. Okay, and so while you're just dumping all of your people in as individuals, there's also a process to write rules to do the matching so that you create a single representation of that person that can be linked across systems. A good example of this is those reservations, for example. Reservations are related to individuals. Okay, if you have two individuals, okay, you're using this unified person that you're creating to pull down all of the related data based on them. Okay, so we're trying to map to that golden record per se of a person so that we can then pull existing data. Now, I will go to the end here quickly to show you how we bring this into CRM. Because in theory, we have that CRM contact, and like I said, the goal here is to bring that data into the context of CRM. I'm going to pull out our Coral Clouds app here. And in this app, we have our contact called Sophia. And we want to be able to show all of her reservations and some insight into her spend and lifetime value here on our contact record. The number one question we get after every Dreamforce demo, every keynote is, where did this profile card come from? How did you get this information on the card? Okay, and the way that we do that is by syncing data from Data Cloud to CRM for display. It's a Lightning Web Component. Okay, we're just viewing data that exists on the contact record, but we need to get that data from Data Cloud into the context of CRM to be able to do that. Now, there are two ways that we can do that quickly and out of the box. And the first of those is through Data Cloud related lists that were recently released back around Dreamforce time, to where you can actually bring that reservation data that's coming in from Data Cloud into the context of CRM by specifying a related list connection to CRM. Now, the second of those is through a capability called copy fields that allow you to specify DMOs inside of Data Cloud, so data model objects, as well as a capability called calculated insights, okay? And copy the values from those directly to the data in CRM on batch. And so if we go over to the setup page for this object, you'll see that in this contact setup, we have the option for both of those in the tabs. So we have Data Cloud related lists, where we can create a relationship between the DMO itself, in this case reservations, and the contact, so that that data then becomes available in the context of the contact. And then we have the Data Cloud copy field capability that allows you to select a object, data model object in Data Cloud, or a calculated insight and run that mapping. And so you can see here, it's pretty simple. We're just selecting the data in Data Cloud, okay, and we're doing a direct mapping to the field in CRM. Okay, this happens on bulk. This tool is actually built and maintained by our API team because they're building all of the Data Cloud sync functionality. So every time that calculated insight is updated, there is actually a bulk job being registered in your org that's upserting any changes into the context of CRM so that you don't have to give your users direct access to the data that's in Data Cloud. You can just copy over any relevant information to the context of their CRM records. Okay, and so that's just a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the Data Cloud capabilities. Hopefully that unlocks a little bit of it mentally for you and what it means in the context of CRM, but that is just scratching the surface. That's literally just how you connect the data and copy it over to CRM. There are loads of capabilities around segmentation, around activation that you can bring into play with Data Cloud that just really build and build and build on the use cases and ways that you can use it. I will show you one of those a bit later in my last sort of AI-focused demo. But for the sake of time, that's one side of the Einstein 1 platform and how we've been able to really scale and build that out over the last 12 months. The other side is all of the work that we've been doing around generative AI. Okay, like I said, if you missed the beginning of my talk, 12 months ago, we announced Prompt Builder. Copilot wasn't announced and available to customers till like December. Okay, and we're now at the point where there are hundreds of customers using these tools and capabilities every day to start bringing little bits of generative insight into the work that they're doing and the apps that they're building. Now, when we first launched these capabilities, okay, when generative AI, when ChatGPT was launched, it started with customers, with probably Salesforce employees as well, I wouldn't admit to it, literally copying the values from a record in CRM and pasting them into ChatGPT and generating responses. I'm sure a lot of us are guilty of putting information that we probably shouldn't be putting into some of these tools into them to generate responses. And it was at that point that we knew we needed to do something incredibly fast as a company to combat our own users doing that and putting that type of information into tools like ChatGPT. And so our initial response was to start embedding generative AI into some of our tools because we needed to move quickly. And that's where you saw tools like our sales email generation and our Service Cloud replies, formerly known as Sales and Service GPT products, become embedded with generative AI so that you were starting to have those capabilities behind the scenes running in the back end that weren't configurable or modifiable. So you'd have like 5 sales email templates that'd be running in the background that you couldn't modify. Obviously, that's not how we build things at Salesforce. Okay, we want to make sure that everything is built in an extensible manner so that you can go and configure and tweak and build your own capability. And we've done it with a lot of this generative AI functionality to the point that any team that's building generative AI functionality at Salesforce that's using prompts, okay, is building using the same tools that you have as an admin or developer. So they're building prompts in Prompt Builder. They're grounding data in the same way. They're using the trust layer to build their apps in the same way that we're granting to our customers. Now, one of the reasons that we've been so successful in our implementation and distribution within the business world through this technology is because the very first part of this all that we built was the trust layer. It was a principled approach to understanding that all of our customers are going to need to be grounding sensitive data and making sure that that data isn't transited over to a third party, whether or not they are training those models. And so we wanted to make sure that when you're sending a prompt through, we're going through the process of secure data retrieval from the page context, dynamic grounding through third parties, through data masking, and ensuring that all of the prompts that get sent to third-party models are sanitized before they're hitting those models and then sent back to their users. There's loads of content out there on this, so I won't get in too deep with it. But that led to us building and delivering Prompt Builder to our customers. And it's been a huge success as far as really enabling everyone to be able to build and ground prompts with the data in CRM, as well as grounding from external systems using third parties. And the currently available use cases for this are sales emails, field generation, record summaries, and flex templates. Kier did a great session on this earlier, so I'm not going to get into too much detail, but go back and watch that on the video after this session today. And I'm going to jump into a couple of demos since I knew we'd be running out of time because there's so much to talk about here. Well, I'm just going to quickly show you Prompt Builder and some of the types of prompts you can create from a little bit more of a technical perspective. So we talk about prompts as being these templates for interacting with large language models and grounding them on data. Okay, this is a simple example of a prompt that you're creating that brings in the context of CRM into the prompt. So you're a marketer at this company. You're going to write a description for one of the experiences, like snorkeling, that the resort may provide, and providing information about that CRM record and grounding it so that it knows what you're talking about, okay? Like I said, one of the ways that you can distribute this prompt is through field generation or field templates. What that means is we can go into a record page. In this case, let's go into our tropical snorkeling adventure record, and you can actually modify this page layout to add that prompt to the field that it's targeted for. And so, for example, if I go and look at the description field here, we're still loading, what you'll see here on the field configuration on the right-hand side of the app is we can then specify a prompt template that we want to attach to that page layout so that when users are editing or modifying records, they can click that button and generate the response using the prompt. Has anyone seen this before? Or is this new? Okay, so this is new to a lot of you. I'll focus on that for a minute. This is just one way of how the prompts show up in the app itself. So if I go in to edit this record, you will see here that I now have that button here, the little magic button, to call the prompt, take the prompt in the context of that record and ground it, and then bring that prompt into the UI. So it's ran that here, and it's generated a summary for us of this excursion for us to put then into the record. I can ask Einstein to make it shorter because it has the context of the chat, and I can also click to use it on the record, okay? And I can bring that into the context of the record, okay? These can also be run on the fly, so if you wanted to bring a field generation template into a flow, if you wanted to bring it into an Apex class, you can do that as well. But this is something even cooler, okay? Those prompt templates can be called in Apex. And so, for example, moving ahead a tiny bit, let me open up a class that I have here. We can call that prompt template using the Connect API. Okay, and so we have a Connect API adapter that allows you to wrap the inputs. So for example here, we have our experience session here, where we're getting the ID of the record that we want to use in the prompt. Okay, we're then going to take that prompt template that we have defined, and we can execute it by instantiating the Einstein template generations input here. Okay, we can then generate a response from that prompt template. Okay, and so in short, we're taking the prompt that we've created, we're passing a record ID to it, and then we're getting a response in Apex. So if I wanted to run that here, I can actually run that in anonymous Apex right here in the app. And so let's go ahead and hide that and then execute the class here. And what it's going to do is it's going to just go and query a record and pass it into that class so that I can generate a social media post for this experience. And what you'll see here in my debug is that post. I've asked it to write a post for me. It's got some emojis in there. It's put it into JSON so that I can pull it into a Lightning Web Component, so that I can then take that prompt that I've created that's grounded in CRM data, and I can actually build that into an app that I have in my org. Okay, and so we're going to go through here into our experience session. In this case, let's do one for the wine tasting tour. I can then edit this page and bring our social media post component here, and it's not here. So I'm going to skip ahead in this demo and move on to something a little bit different since we're running short on time. There's lots of great content on Copilot, so I'm going to ignore Copilot for a second, and I'm going to move ahead to something you probably haven't seen before. Okay, and that is retrieval augmented generation and our vector database capability that lives on Data Cloud. Okay, grounding data by calling out to an API, by calling out to a flow or an Apex class is pretty cool. But what if we could take the data that we have in Data Cloud and create a vector database table that's indexed so that we can then search across that? Now, what does that mean? It means that we can take even larger data sets. It means we can take documents, we can take videos, transcripts, okay, and we can create a database that chunks all of that context, okay, and allows it to be searchable via a class semantically so that you can find relevant information incredibly fast. That was launched at Dreamforce. It's working. It's in pilot right now with a load of customers. But pretty much what it allows you to do is take data from that third party, okay, transcribe it, chunk it up into incredibly small pieces, and then search across it from your Salesforce org. And so what you're doing is you're taking, in this case, documents, reviews, information, okay, and you're vectorizing it into tiny chunks that it can search across much faster than if it were searching across text. Okay, on that note, I'm going to show it to you. So the lovely team in Amsterdam, of course, created an app in Data Cloud that takes wine reviews for different wines to suggest wine pairings. Okay, so they've taken hundreds of thousands of reviews of different wines so that they can then be searched across semantically using Salesforce. Okay, and so I'm going to go into Data Cloud here and show you what this looks like. So we have a DMO inside of Data Cloud for the wine reviews, but what we've also created is a search index inside of Data Cloud. Okay, it's our wine database that's coming from AWS, and we can go in and we can edit this search index just to show you what this looks like. And so here, what you'll see, we have our wine AWS data model object here. We can then set up the chunking and what fields we're wanting to extract into the vector. Okay, and we can run them through an embedding model. In this case, we only have one available, just this V2 embedding model that's going to run through, pre-process, and create vectors for all of this data. Now, if I show you what this looks like when I query it, I can go into our query editor here. And quickly, I'm going to show you what happens. So what it's done is it's chunked up the data into really small pieces that it can query across. And so, for example, if I wanted to search for wines that have a berry type of flavor, I can run that query, and it's going to comb through every single review and description in that database. And what it's going to do is match a percentage-based prediction on how near those search terms are to the larger database. Okay, in this example, I can go ahead and I can then run a more complex query that's actually going to match the parameters, see which results are nearer, and then display those in a list. And so I can run that query, and you can see here, it can actually very quickly run that percentage, see which results are relevant, and bring them in here. Now, what's even better is that you can run that in Apex. And so I have a semantic search controller here that we've created, okay, that just creates a SQL query in Apex to run a semantic search across that database. So while this is really cool for AI, there is much more purpose that can be used searching semantically across these vectors directly from Apex. This has enabled us to bring it into things like Copilot. And so the last thing I will show you quickly is I'm going to go into the org here, wherever I have a record. I can ask Copilot now to do that same thing for me. So I can ask Copilot to suggest some wines that go well with duck. Apparently, I don't drink wine, so I'm not the best one to be talking about this demo. But through Copilot, I can then use a custom action to query semantically across that wine database and send all of that additional context into the large language model to get a response back. And so what it's doing is it's creating a plan, it's creating instruction from that, and then it's going through and injecting it with the data that's coming from the vector database. But I'm talking about a database here. You can run documents, you can run video, you can process all kinds of information there. It appears like we may be hitting, there we go. So there's our response. It's gone through and it's taken all of the data from the vector database and written up those suggestions there for you. and my time is up. So I'm going to finish off by sharing some resources with you. Okay, there's lots of great information here around getting hands-on with Data Cloud, with this AI capability, and hopefully you got some insight into some of the ways that you can start bringing together Data Cloud and AI, and some of the capabilities we have coming soon from Salesforce. Thank you all very much.